Stories Between Us anthology, where Black queer men's lives, love, and tension take center stage. Zachary had mastered the art of smiling when he didn't mean it. It was the kind of survival skill you learn early when you're the favorite son and everyone expects you to be exactly what they imagined. That December, as he turned off the ignition in front of his family's house, the air was crisp with that specific kind of cold that makes your breath visible and your choices clear. Inside the SUV, Jeff shifted slightly, watching him in silence. No accusation, no pressure, just waiting to be acknowledged. Zachary hadn't introduced him as a boyfriend. Not in real life, and certainly not here. Not in the place where Christmas lights glowed on houses with American flags, and every cousin had 2 kids and a mortgage. "Let me go in first," Zachary said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. He didn't wait for a response. He didn't have to. They'd had this conversation before. Jeff leaned back in the passenger seat, his expression unreadable, framed by the glow of the holiday lights that spilled from the front window. The house hadn't changed. Same red wreath, same perfectly aligned blinking reindeer on the lawn, same expectations. The door opened before he could knock. His mother, still holding a wine glass, pulled him into a hug that felt more like a performance than a welcome. "Look who finally made it home," she said loud enough for everyone inside to hear. The warmth inside smelled like cinnamon and unresolved tension. Someone shouted his name. Someone else started filming on their phone. He smiled. He was always smiling. Then she looked over his shoulder. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing through the window. "Just my roommate," Zachary said, too quickly, too soft, but loud enough to matter. And in the car, Jeff didn't react. He was used to being invisible. The dining room was set like it belonged in a holiday ad, full of gold chargers and neatly folded napkins and too many different conversations happening at once. Zachary sat between his little cousin and a church friend he barely remembered, nodding and laughing on cue while his mother passed around the cornbread dressing like it was tradition and not obligation. Across the room, Jeff was helping in the kitchen, asking where the oven mitts were, pretending like he wasn't being politely ignored by every aunt in a wig and every uncle who only half acknowledged him. He moved with that careful grace he always carried, never taking up too much space, never stepping out of line, even though Zachary knew he was watching everything. Watching how Zach performed. Watching how he switched his voice when his father asked about work. Watching how he let an old high school friend slap him on the back and say, "Man, we really thought you'd be married by now," with a wink that landed a little too long. And Zachary laughed, because that's what you do when everyone's looking. But when he finally sat down beside Jeff, plate full of food he didn't want, he could feel the silence between them stretch. Jeff didn't say anything at first, just passed him the hot sauce, then leaned in just enough to whisper, "You're really good at this." Zachary stared straight ahead, pretending he didn't feel the sting in his chest. "At what?" he asked, fork scraping the edge of the plate. Jeff didn't answer. He didn't need to. It was all in the look, the kind of look that says, "I love you, but I see you hiding, and I don't know how long I can sit here pretending I'm not the one being hidden." Across the table, his mother smiled at someone's joke and asked if Zach was still dating that girl from grad school. He laughed again, louder this time, and said no. Said he was single. And Jeff took a slow sip of his sweet tea and looked away. Later that evening, Main Street was dressed up in garland and oversized red bows. with fake snow machines puffing along the curb to make up for the southern weather that couldn't quite commit to winter. Zachary and Jeff strolled side by side, sipping hot cider from paper cups, weaving between vendor booths and carolers, passing black families taking selfies in front of the town tree. It almost felt normal, almost like they were just two men in love, spending the holidays in a town that could hold them. Jeff kept glancing at Zach, a small smile tucked behind the steam of his cup, like maybe things were different, like maybe this trip wouldn't hurt. But then it happened fast, the way those moments always do. Zachary Price? The voice came from across the booth selling candied pecans. A trio of old classmates approached, all fleece vests and college town nostalgia. One had a baby in a front carrier. Another wore a Letterman jacket from a decade ago, cracked at the sleeves but still holding weight. "Man, look at you," they said, pulling him into handshakes that were really status checks. "Back in town for the holidays?" Zachary nodded, posture straightening like he'd just been called to stage. "Yeah, visiting the folks. You know how it is." They looked at Jeff then, curiosity sharp and polite. One asked, "And this your boy?" There was a beat of silence, a little too long for comfort. Zachary laughed, not full, not warm, but practiced. "Nah, this is my roommate, Jeff." The words sat there like something sour on a clean plate. Jeff smiled and extended a hand anyway. "Good to meet y'all." The men nodded, shifted their weight, then pivoted back to Zach. "We still playing that alumni game next month if you're around. You still playing ball?" "Trying to stay in shape," Zach said, grinning, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. They traded a few more pleasantries, then parted ways with back slaps and promises no one meant. As they walked toward the car, Jeff didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Zachary knew that silence. It wasn't anger. It was grief. Jeff sipped the last of his cider, then tossed the cup into a trash bin without looking back. "Roommate?" he said under his breath. Not a question, just a fact. And Zachary, who hadn't stopped walking, suddenly wasn't sure if Jeff was still behind him. The next morning, the cold had settled into everything. The kind of southern chill that seeps under doorways and clings to your fingertips. Jeff was standing outside in borrowed gloves, gripping a tangled knot of Christmas lights, squinting up at the edge of the roof, while Zachary's dad balanced on a shaky ladder in his work boots and a fleece-lined denim jacket he wore every December without fail. "You're gonna have to hold this tighter," his father grumbled, not unkindly, but in that tone that made it clear instructions were trust. Jeff steadied the base of the ladder, lips tight, nodding, and the two of them worked in an easy silence that came from men who didn't need small talk to prove usefulness. It wasn't some magical breakthrough. There was no confession, no approval handed out like a gift. But there was a moment, somewhere between stringing lights around the garage and fixing the bent reindeer antlers, where Zachary's dad turned and said, "You're good with your hands." And Jeff just smiled and said, "Raised by women who didn't believe in waiting for help." They both chuckled. It was small, but it was real. When they finished, the front of the house lit up with soft white LEDs that blinked slow and steady like a heartbeat. Zachary had watched from the living room window, hidden behind the curtain, caught between guilt and gratitude, because somehow Jeff had found a way to belong in a place that still didn't know what to call him. Later, over coffee, his dad mentioned Jeff without naming anything, just said, "He's a solid guy." The quiet ones usually are. Zachary nodded, pretending it didn't mean the world to hear that. Pretending he hadn't wanted that acceptance since he was 16 and scared. But mostly, pretending Jeff hadn't already given up on expecting it from him first. Late that night, the hallway creaked under Jeff's feet as he padded barefoot toward Zachary's old bedroom, guided only by the soft hum of the space heater and the pull of wanting something real before the performance resumed in the morning. The house was dark and still, everyone tucked in after too much wine and just enough holiday joy. He didn't knock, just walked in. Zachary was already under the covers, phone in hand, scrolling something mindless with his head propped on a pillow. When he looked up, his whole face changed. "You're supposed to be down the hall," he whispered. "I got lost," Jeff said, smirking, already slipping inside and locking the door behind him. Zachary didn't fight it. He just set the phone aside and let Jeff climb in bed beside him, their bodies finding each other like muscle memory. They kissed slowly at first, then deeper, like they were trying to outrun the silence they'd been holding all day. Hands under shirts, breathing fast, the comforter sliding off as they tangled up in one another. Zachary's leg hooked over Jeff's. Jeff kissed him like he was trying to remind him who he was, like he was tired of being invisible in daylight and wanted to be chosen, even if just for the night. Zachary kissed back until he couldn't, until guilt started pressing against his chest harder than Jeff's body did. He pulled back, hand against Jeff's chest like a wall. "You have to go," he said. Jeff blinked, confused, lips still parted, sweat at his temple. "What?" Zachary sat up, wiping his face like that would wipe away the moment. "If my parents hear anything, I can't. Please, you have to go back to your room." The words stung more than they should have. Jeff didn't argue. He just sat back, legs over the edge of the bed, catching his breath in the dark. "Yeah," he said softly. "Of course." He stood, pulled his shirt over his head, and walked back toward the door without looking back. The chain around his neck had loosened during their makeout session, unnoticed in the folds of the sheet, and slipped off as he walked away. It landed quietly on Zachary's pillow, like the truth always does, visible, undeniable, and too late to take back. It was always something small. That's how the truth usually cracked open. Not a fight, not a scene, just a quiet moment when something ended up where it wasn't supposed to be. The next morning, his mother was changing the sheets in Zachary's childhood room, the guest one he was supposed to be sleeping in alone, when she found it. A gold chain with a slim, worn pendant resting between the pillows. It was unmistakably Jeff's. Zachary came back from the store to find her standing in the hallway, necklace dangling from her fingers like it weighed more than gold ever should. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to, just looked at him and asked, "How long have you been lying to me?" He froze, the bag of groceries still in his hand, breath caught somewhere between defense and apology. "It's not what you think," he said, and even he didn't believe it. Her face didn't change, just softened in that disappointed way that mothers perfect when they realize their sons have been hiding pieces of themselves for years. "You brought someone into my home, someone you clearly care about. But instead of being proud, you made him invisible." Zachary didn't have a reply. He just looked at the necklace, now resting on the kitchen counter, and suddenly it felt like a timeline. All the months Jeff had been patient. All the times he asked for nothing but the truth. All the morning, Zachary woke up next to him and still introduced him as a friend. That chain had survived airports, birthdays, and late nights at home when they laughed so hard they forgot to be careful. And now it had been reduced to the evidence. His mother didn't yell. She didn't need to. "I'm not mad that you're gay," she said. "I'm mad you thought I wouldn't love you anyway." And that's when the shame hit. Slow, deep, and unbearable. He nodded. Barely. She walked away without another word, and Zachary just stood there, holding a bag of eggs and orange juice, and regret. The zipper on Jeff's duffel bag sounded louder than it should have, like the kind of sound that announces an ending before anyone has the courage to say it out loud. He wasn't rushing, but he wasn't stalling either. Just folding things carefully, one by one, like someone who didn't want to break anything on the way out, even if something had already been broken. Zachary leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, still wearing the same hoodie he'd thrown on that morning when everything fell apart. "She found your necklace," he said quietly, voice raw. "Jeff didn't stop packing." "I figured she did. I saw sitting on the counter." There was no edge in his tone, no heat, just finality. Zachary stepped further into the room, unsure of what to do with his hands, unsure of how to fix something that had been unraveling since the moment they crossed the state line. "She wasn't angry," he added, almost like he was trying to offer it as a gift. "She just said she was disappointed I didn't say anything." Jeff looked up then, eyes steady. "And why didn't you?" Zachary opened his mouth, closed it, then shrugged, helpless. "Because I didn't want to lose everything." Jeff nodded slowly. "And what do you think I am?" That landed. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was weighted. Jeff stood up, slinging the bag over his shoulder, that familiar tired grace in his movements, like someone used to leaving before they're asked to. "I never needed a spotlight," he said, "but I deserve to be seen." Zachary reached for him without thinking, catching his wrist, gripping it harder than he meant to. "Please don't go." Jeff looked at the hand holding him, then at Zachary's face. "You brought me here to lie about who I am, who we are. And I went along with it because I love you. But I can't keep doing this, Zach. I can't keep making myself small so you can be safe." The words weren't cruel, but they cracked something open. Zachary let go. Jeff walked past him without another word, footsteps soft, like he knew the way out by heart. The Uber was already pulling up when Zachary burst through the front door, shoes half on, jacket forgotten, breath caught in his throat like the truth finally catching up to him. Jeff was standing on the curb, bag in hand, calm in that terrifying way people are when they've already let go. The driver rolled down the window, asked for a name, but neither of them responded. Zachary stepped off the porch into the cold air, the kind that bites through denim and ego, and for once, he didn't care who was watching. "Wait," he called out, louder than he meant to. Jeff didn't turn. "Please," Zachary said, this time softer but closer. "I need to say it. All of it." Jeff exhaled slowly, turned around, tired eyes meeting his. "Then say it." Zachary's hands were shaking. Not from the cold, but from the weight of all the years he'd spent hiding behind carefully constructed silences. "I love you," he said. Just like that. No build-up, no apology wrapped around it. Just the raw thing. "I've loved you through every text I never sent from my mom's house. Through every wedding I stood in line about being single. Through every moment, I chose safety over us, and I'm done doing that. The wind whipped between them, but neither moved.
You shouldn't have had to ask to be seen, Zachary continued. You should have been claimed the moment you walked through that door. And I'm sorry I didn't have the courage until now, but I'm not letting you leave without knowing that I choose you. Fully, publicly, and permanently.
Jeff blinked, chest rising and falling like he didn't trust it. Are you sure you're not just afraid of losing me? I'm terrified, Zachary said, but I'm more afraid of living without you. The front door creaked open behind them. Zachary's mother stood on the porch, flanked by cousins and uncles and too many opinions. He turned to them, hand reaching for Jeff's. This is my partner, he said. This is the man I love. A pause. The kind that stretches just long enough to make you brace for impact. And then his aunt called out from behind a candy cane wreath. Well, of course he is. You think we ain't been new? Laughter followed, warm, teasing, easy. His mother rolled her eyes, but smiled. You could just said that and saved us all this drama? Zachary let out a laugh he didn't know he'd been holding. Jeff looked at him, stunned, and slowly, finally, smiled. The Uber drove off without them. They went back inside together, fingers interlocked. And this time no one looked away. Dinner ended in the kind of full-bellied comfort that only happens when tension has finally left the room. The plates were scraped clean, the kids were passed out in corners, and the wine was half gone. Jeff had settled into the couch beside Zachary's cousin, showing her how to season her greens without disrespecting the pot. And Zachary sat across the room just watching, really watching for the first time. He didn't look like someone on the outside anymore. He looked like family. Later, when most of the house had gone quiet, Zachary slipped on his coat and tapped Jeff on the shoulder with a look that said, "Come with me." They stepped outside into the backyard, where the snow was falling soft and slow, covering the patio furniture like powdered sugar and making everything feel hushed and holy. The Christmas lights they'd hung earlier blinked around them, casting gold against their skin. Jeff wrapped his arms around himself for warmth, then turned to say something, but Zachary beat him to it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box, and for a moment, Jeff thought he was joking. "You're not serious," he said. "I've never been more serious," Zachary replied, opening the box with slightly shaking hands. Inside was a simple gold band. No diamond, no theatrics. Just something real, something earned. "I don't have a speech," Zachary admitted, voice low. "Just this feeling I've had since the moment I thought I lost you, that I never want to be the man who doesn't say how he feels again. I want to build a life where you don't have to guess, where we don't hide, where we love out loud." Jeff blinked back tears, but didn't speak. Just nodded, once, then again, as if saying the word would break the spell. Zachary took his hand and slid the ring on slowly, reverently, like he was giving him a key to something more permanent than promises. "You good?" Zachary asked, smiling now, nervous and boyish in a way Jeff hadn't seen in weeks. Jeff laughed, wiped his face, then pulled him close. "I'm good," he whispered. "I'm all the way good." They stood in the snow, standing close, while the lights blinked behind them and the house pulsed with the hum of family and leftovers, and finally, peace. There were no cameras, no speeches, just the quiet click of love landing in the right place. And for the first time, neither of them was pretending. The next morning, the kitchen was already alive with noise. The sound of Donny Hathaway playing low on the speakers and the scent of cinnamon rolls baking. Zachary stood barefoot by the fridge, one hand on his mug, the other already reaching for Jeff when he wandered in, wearing nothing but sweats and one of Zach's old shirts. His mother didn't flinch, just nodded toward the skillet. "He eats eggs?" she asked without turning around. "Cheese or no cheese?" Jeff smiled, still half asleep. "Cheese, please." "Good," she said. "A man with taste." They moved around each other like choreography. No more pretending, no more careful space between them. Zachary's dad came in humming and slapped Jeff on the back like he'd been doing it for years. Then the cousins started pouring in, one by one, in pajamas and bonnets, already fighting over who finished the orange juice and who left the syrup cap sticky. Nobody blinked when Zachary fixed Jeff's plate before his own. No one paused when Jeff sat beside him instead of across. The Annies clocked it immediately. "So," one said, sitting down with her coffee and side-eye, "when y'all gonna get started on some grandbabies?" Jeff almost choked. Zachary laughed into his mug. "Y'all gonna adopt? What about surrogacy? I saw a video the other day of this gay couple on TikTok. They got beautiful chocolate twin babies." Another cousin chimed in from across the table. "You bringing Jeff to the family reunion next July? Or is this one of those Christmas flings?" Then someone cracked a joke. Someone else passed the biscuits. When Zachary reached under the table and laced his fingers with Jeff's, they didn't need to say anything. The room was full of noise, full of life, full of people who'd spent a whole year pretending not to see them and were now acting like they always had. That was the thing about family. You didn't always get the apology, just the invitation to sit down and eat. And Jeff, hand wrapped in Zachary's, plate warm in front of him, took the seat. Like he'd always belonged there. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us Anthology. You can find every episode on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Rate the show and leave a comment. It helps more people find us.